Glavnavi, can you take the control?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me, sir? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the second technical session of International Conference on Hydrology and Water Sources. Good afternoon. As a keynote speaker, I will request Peter Kovacs for his keynote lecture. Just as a introduction, Dr. Peter is a civil engineer working in UNESCO, okay, and he has started his professional career in Regional Water Directorate and continues his activity in as an environmental inspectorate. And he used the chair of UNESCO Water Conservation between 2015 to 2018. Now continued his
Dr.
continue as a
Glavnavi,
vice chair.
Dr. Ghulam Nabi, you are reading the introduction of Dr. Shahbaz. So please go
Oh,
to Dr. Peter.
okay. I so I request Dr. Peter. He can introduce himself briefly. Then he can start his keynote lecture. Dr. Peter, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and it is my real pleasure to be present also in the second international conference on hydrology and water resources. Last year, I already made a presentation on the first meeting, and I little bit disappointed that I cannot be present in person during this meeting because it would be much better to be there. I am a civil engineer and I have a, let's say, a long career in the administration of the Hungarian water management. And I also have several positions, including state secretary and also representing my country in many international relations. I'm trying to share my screen if I be able to do that. Just a minute. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see your presentation. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm trying to start my presentation. If it started, I will jump into the subject. So, thank you. And I would like to focus in my presentation today, which was also in the focus of the World Water Day, the groundwater issue, how we can make the invisible visible. I think it's really an important issue also in Pakistan, and it's also one of the key issue in my country, in Hungary. As you see on the map, the country is located in the basin of the Carpathians. So we are surrounded by high mountains. You see that we are quite rich in water and also especially in groundwater. Related with the surface waters, we have more than 95% of the discharge coming from the neighboring countries through 24 rivers or river courses, and only 3 major rivers is leaving us. If we are looking for the groundwaters, you see we have a very wide variation of different aquifers, including karstic aquifers and also volcanic origin. And as you see, the country border is cutting most of the groundwater aquifers, so they are also shared with the neighboring countries. 95% of the drinking water also coming from groundwater, and we have many significant water use based on groundwater as well, including irrigation in the places where there is no surface water, and also thermal waters are widely used in the countries. It's also provide a base flow for many surface waters and also a key part of the groundwater dependent ecosystems. And also it is one of the tools to ensure the local water balance. But we have a growing interest and importance of the groundwaters due to the climate change. As I already mentioned, the majority of the drinking water production coming from the groundwaters, many of them bank filtration called, which is just through the natural filtration of gravel and sand, we can provide a good quality of drinking water. And we're using karstic waters and also porous aquifers for such a purpose. And only the remaining, a very tiny part, 5% is of the drinking water supply is depending on surface waters. And of course, we have to protect our drinking water resources. So we, by law or by legislation, we are delineating safeguard zones around vulnerable drinking water resources, which means that there are many activities are restricted. And we also have to comply with a new European Drinking Water Directive, which has a more stringent limit values than it was before. And it's also containing a risk-based approach. And of course, we have to protect our water quality.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Your slides are not moving.
I'm really sorry because my slides are moving on my screen.
Can you please reshare these slides?
So you cannot see my slides, it's a problem.
Yeah, we can. Yes, now it's moving. Now it's okay. Now it is okay.
So I'm living in this mode, not in the presenter mode, because it seems to, no, it's moving.
Yes, now it is moving.
Okay, so I go into that slide which was just mentioned, that we also aiming to protect the groundwater resources, also that with the goal to minimize the necessity of the level of the treatment, because water treatment might be very expensive if we are using a polluted groundwater. On the map, you can see there are many locations already delineated as a protective zone around the water, drinking water resources. And it's also have to mention that irrigation from the groundwater also a big problem might be in the country. And it has by law obligation to get a permit for irrigation from the groundwater. But we have a problem of many of the illegal wells which are using the resources without any permits. And we have also very strict restrictions where we can use groundwater for irrigation. So can be used only if the surface water is not available or not economically feasibility to get it. And deep groundwater and karstic water only can be used if we are applying also water saving technologies. We also had some legal process in the past, so we try to simplify the licensing procedure also. And we also applying some fees for the water abstraction according to the Water Framework Directive Article 9, which also incentive for the efficient water use. We have to apply the principle of cost recovery in the water services, and we also have to apply environmental and resource costs as well. As you see, the climate change also has a very big correspondence related with irrigation. Due to the extended droughts, we are using more and more groundwater also, so we have problems already with water scarcity in some regions. You see on the map with the color indication where are the most severe problems we are having, and what could be the solution. This is always a big question. So we try to summarize somehow the problems, to degreasing on the groundwater levels, degreasing of water flows in the rivers, which also affecting the groundwaters. And also there is an increasing competition between the users. So that is why we are trying to also get answers for the questions. And we are also trying to use a high-tech technology also for predict the droughts. And also we would like to increase the water use efficiency, especially when we are using groundwater. We are very rich in geothermal energy, and of course it's also linked with the deep groundwater, which has a very good capacity of heat. We can use it also in the agriculture. We can heat greenhouses, and it's also widely used for recreation purposes. As you see, we have a very favorable conditions in the Pannonian Plain, in the Carpathian basins. So we also like to use it as much as possible. As you see on the map, the country is fully covered with thermal wells and springs. And in the lowland area, which is a flat area, mostly agriculture are using the thermal water. In the other places, it's most used for recreation and other purposes. So the medical and bathing water, heating, municipal use, also for heating, and the over abstraction is a living problem, and also leads to the decrease of the pressure in the thermal water reservoirs. So it would be more difficult to get the water out from the aquifers. And also we have some problems with the reuse of the thermal water. If the water is unpolluted, so it's used only for thermal purposes, I mean for heating, in this case, it's possible to re-inject to the same layer where it's come from. But in many cases, the water is polluted due to the recreation, bathing, and other activities. So we cannot re-inject into the original layers. So we are discharging them into the surface waters. That it can be problematic in some places because of the high salt content and other pollutants. And of course, the other activities also risking the groundwater quantity and quality as well. So the overuse through the illegal wells, it might be a real problem, and we have to apply some administrative solution to solve that problems. And also the illegal wells also can cause the contamination of the deeper aquifers. That is why we developed recently a web page which containing a lot of useful information how to make a proper well, and which is technically and also legally well established, establishing the water use. And in the country we have many open gravel mining lakes, which in fact are part of the groundwater table. So they have also some risk with the increasing evaporation, and also it has a high risk of pollution. What we can do, what are the possible measures? So we are trying to implement artificial recharge in some places, the managed aquifer recharge, the reuse of the treated wastewaters, and of course we try to increase the control over the illegal wells. The licensing procedure should be more easy or lighter. And of course, we also applying many measures in the common agricultural policy of the European Union, which also applied in Hungary. So we are paying farmers also compensation if they are complying with the Water Framework Directive. And of course, education and public awareness raising is a very important part of the activity. So the groundwater is very vulnerable in many places, and there are many pollution sources exist, like point source, like the landfills or industrial installations, animal farms, also historically contaminated sites, or even man-made accidents can have a very big impact on the groundwaters. And of course, agriculture could be also one of the key polluters through the fertilizers and pesticides. What we can do again, the measures which we can apply, the restrictions, the licensing, prohibitions and also technical protection have to be built, mostly in the case of the historical contaminated sites. And the monitoring and control also are very important. And again, public awareness and education. Of course, we have a country-wide monitoring system on groundwater. We are measuring quantity and quality as well. So the water quantity side, we are measuring water level, the pressure. In the case of springs, the yield of the spring. On the side of the water quality, we have also measuring pollutants, if it's possible, also the impacts of potentially polluting activities. And also we have some naturally occurring substances which might be counted as a pollution, but they have no man-made origin. For example, we had a problem in the drinking water quality for a while before it was technically solved with the arsenic. So it's a natural substance coming from the ground, but it is a pollutant in some way. And also the wells which are using the groundwaters can be, and also the monitoring wells are operated by the state or either operated by the users of the groundwater. So the statewide monitoring is providing a background values and the general overview of the water status and also the impacts of the diffuse pollution sources. Of course, the user has his own interest as well. He's monitoring what he gets from the deep well. And also, this monitoring also gives us a picture on the impacts of specific activities on the groundwater, and also gives us a, let's say, monitoring values for water quality for specific water uses. And generally speaking, we have to comply with the groundwater monitoring with the requirements of the Water Framework Directive of the European Union, which is quite complicated because it is containing also a regular surveillance and also operational monitoring and many other monitoring tasks are included. You can see on the map the monitoring network in the country. And also, I think it's very important to mention the international relevance of the groundwater management of the country. As you see, we are in the Danube Basin completely, which is the most international river basin of the world. And practically majority of the water aquifers are shared with the neighboring countries. We can use also the Danube Cooperation Framework, which is called the ICPDR, the International Commission for the Protection of the Danube River. And in this framework, and also through the bilateral transboundary water management commissions, we are harmonizing our activities on the groundwater bodies as well. What does it mean? We delineated the international importance of the groundwater bodies, which has a basin-wide importance. You can see them on the map. It is shared by 3 countries or shared by 2 countries. And it also means that we have to inform each other if we are, let's say, planning some new activities on the shared groundwater aquifer. For example, if we have, let's say, deep wells for thermal water, which is shared by the neighboring countries, we have to get also their approval, and vice versa. If the neighbors are implementing some new measures, it has to be also taken to the Water Commission for discussion. I think it's really important because only joint actions can improve the status of the groundwaters. And of course, beyond the groundwater, we have many other tasks and activities. That is why we elaborated our national water strategy on Hungary. And this also summarizing the most important task, not only the groundwater field, but also on the other activities. So we have many different challenges in the water management. Flood issues are very significant in the country. The new emerging subject is the reuse of the treated wastewater due to the climate change effects. The development of the irrigation, one of the key tasks of the water sector in the country. We have large rivers like the Danube and the Tisa River, which is used for navigation as well. So shipping might be also affecting the water management questions. And of course, we have Great Lakes, and also the international cooperation is very important, which has already outlined. So that is why we are the signatory, the party of the Danube River Protection Convention. And I just want to highlight that in the frame of the ICPDR coordination, we also have a lot of activities. Now the second Danube River Basin District Management Plan is ready. And also the Danube Flood Risk Management Plan is also available. So the adoption had just happened recently in February during the ministerial meeting of the Danubian countries. And you can see the website of the ICPDR, where all this documentation in a shorter or a longer form can be obtained on English language. And I also like to highlight that climate change issues are very important for the country and also for the Danube Basin. And it became a significant water management issue during the planning of the River Basin Management Plan. It was taken during the Hungarian presidency of the ICPDR as an important issue. And that is why we also elaborated a Danube Basin-wide climate change. And finally, I also like to highlight the importance of the more wide cooperation framework of international water management, the UNEC Water Convention. And I just want to call your attention to the latest guiding documents or handbooks, which were developed in the framework of that, also with the leadership of Hungary. The handbook on water allocation in the transboundary context, and also the practical guide on the development of agreements and other arrangements for transboundary water cooperation. I think the first publication could be really interesting for many of the countries, as due to the climate change, the increase for the bigger or more water resources also on the transboundary basins are increasing. So thank you very much. That was all from my side. And if you have any question, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peter, for the comprehensive presentation. No doubt you have presented that metering and monitoring of groundwater is very important, and we have to be very careful about it. So I think we can ask a question in question answer session if you are available at the end of this second technical session. So I have one question only for this. So what is meant by thermal well and how it is managed in Hungary? Just
Can you repeat the question because I didn't heard
what?
the first part?
Yes. What is the thermal well and how it is managed for sustainability?
I'm sorry, which kind of well?
You pointed out the thermal well. Thermal well.
Yeah, thermal wells, yes. How they are managed is your question?
Yeah.
Yes, you know the thermal wells usually have a very big depth. The thermal water is in the layers which are in the depth of 1,000, 2,000 meters. So it's not really easy to reach them in many locations. So they are undergo the proper licensing procedure. So in that case, we have no problem with the illegal wells because most of them is a, let's say, a big investment, and the permits are given also on modeling and also on calculations because all these thermal resources are limited. If we are overusing, they are not able to recharge on a natural way, and also the temperature can be lost if we are, let's say, giving too many license for the water users. And also, as I already mentioned, the thermal water can be a problem where to discharge after the use, especially if it's polluted. For example, during the recreation, it's when the people are bathing in that water, it cannot be re-injected to the same layer. So whatever is possible, we are trying to convince the user to re-inject the thermal water, not to lose the quantity and also the capacity. Whenever it's not possible, we are trying to use, let's say, a local methods to make harmful for the discharge into the surface waters. So that is my answer. I hope you happy with that.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.